Rain felt like the world was washing itself clean, but there was no redemption in it, only the cold. Lieutenant Jorah stood ankle-deep in black mud, his visor fogged, his armor cracked and spattered. Around him, the forest pulsed with life not their own. Insects chattered in clicks too precise to be natural. The trees leaned too close together, and the wind, when it moved, whispered with an intelligence that made the back of his neck tighten. This was Earth, or what was left of it. The invasion had been textbook. Orbital suppression, atmospheric sweep, ground deployment. Dominion war doctrine was flawless on paper. They'd turn entire planets into ash with less effort. But Earth had refused to follow the script. It had no global military anymore, no unified defense. It should have been easy. It wasn't. "We're being watched again," said Private Kev, crouched beside a gnarled root, scanning with his field scope. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something worse, the edge of comprehension. "Third time today. They never close in. They're gauging us," Jorah muttered, adjusting his rifle settings, pushing limits, testing reactions. "They're primitives. Scattered militias with scavenged tech. Why do they feel like tacticians?" Jorah didn't answer, because deep down he was wondering the same thing. Their platoon had landed 2 weeks ago. 60 elite Dominion soldiers, seasoned from the quelling of 9 worlds. Now, only 11 remained. The rest had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no wreckage, just sudden silence in the dark. No Dominion war record had seen anything like it. Jorah wasn't supposed to be here. He'd commanded fleets from orbit, crushed insurgencies with one command. But he'd volunteered to join ground units on Earth, intrigued by the resistance reports. What he'd found wasn't a resistance. It was a reckoning. Keth shifted uneasily, his eyes scanning the tangled undergrowth. "Permission to ask freely, sir." "Granted. Do you think they're human?" That made Jorah pause. He'd seen the first kill. One of their scouts, Varn, had been gutted from the shadows, silently. The autopsy showed cuts too clean for beasts, too messy for drones. Later, another soldier's helmet cam had caught a figure for a fraction of a second. Not a monster, not an animal. A man, wearing faded tactical gear. Eyes like ice. "They're human," Jorah said finally, "just not the kind we expected." A chirp came from the comlink, a burst of static, then a whisper. "They found something near the river. Looks like a comms node. Possible human tech." "Copy," Jorah responded. "Pull back and mark coordinates. We'll regroup in 30. No reply. He repeated the order. Silence. Jorah glanced at Keth, who was already rising. Same pattern, the younger soldier murmured. "Lure. Disrupt. Consume." They moved quickly, weapons up, following the ghost of a trail worn by their own boots. Trees thickened. Vines hung like nooses from low branches. The river should have been less than a kilometer away, but every step felt longer, the path curving back on itself like the forest was folding. They found the scout's beacon lying in the moss. No body, no blood, just a node and a message, burned into the soil with a plasma cutter in Dominion standard script. "Leave." Keth stared at it, jaw clenched. "They know our language." "No," Jorah corrected. "They learned it. Fast." He crouched beside the device. It was still warm. Whoever did this was close. Watching. He scanned the trees, pulse slowing, brain switching to old instincts. This wasn't just about firepower. This was about understanding the game the enemy was playing. And they were playing it well. Something caught his eye in the distance. A glint of metal between branches. He motioned to Keth. Quiet, hand signals only. They flanked carefully, boots moving like ghosts over wet roots. The clearing was small, half-eaten by moss and thorn. In the center stood a metal crossbeam Dominion issue, tied with broken wires and shattered armor plates. A warning to them. A trophy to someone else. Jorah stepped closer, and then he heard it just behind him, breathing. He spun. Nothing. Keth's rifle was up, eyes scanning, sweat sliding down his temple. "They're circling us," Keth whispered. "No," Jorah said. "They're hurting us." The realization came too late. The underbrush exploded with movement. Figures lunged from every angle, black-clad, silent, armed with archaic weapons modified for brutal efficiency. One drove a metal hook into Keth's leg, pulling him down. Another crashed into Jorah's, knocking him off balance. His rifle fell. Instinct kicked in. He rolled, drew his sidearm, fired 3 shots. One attacker dropped, but the others moved like shadows, unflinching. Keth screamed, brief, ragged, and then was still. Jorah's fired again, catching another figure in the shoulder. And then it stopped. They didn't kill him. They withdrew, just as suddenly as they'd come. Jorah's dragged himself to his feet, bleeding from a deep gash along his side. Keth lay motionless, breath shallow but alive. Jorah's pulled him to cover, every movement costing him more blood. He looked around. The attackers could have finished him easily, but they didn't. They wanted him alive. That was worse. Keth's eyes fluttered open. "They let us go." "I know." "Why?" Jorah's didn't answer, but in his chest he felt it. The stirrings of a truth he didn't want to admit. These weren't just survivors. They were hunters. He activated his emergency comm, long-range, encrypted, designed for high command only. Static. Then a voice. "Identify." Lieutenant Jorah's. Remaining platoon size. 2. Request immediate extraction. Hostiles possess advanced guerrilla tactics, possible augmented biology or high-level training, not local militia. A pause. Then, extraction denied. Mission objectives remain unchanged. Continue to assess and engage. Jorah stared at the device like it had spoken madness. "Repeat, we're compromised. This is not a suppression mission. Earth is not pacified." Another pause. Then cold finality. "Your orders remain. Glory to the Dominion." The line went dead. Keth laughed bitterly, voice barely above a rasp. "They're abandoning us." "No," Jorah said, crushing the comm underfoot. "They already did." Thunder cracked overhead. Rain fell harder. The forest swallowed them again. Jorah looked down at Keth, bloody, unconscious. Then out at the trees where the enemy waited. Not just humans. A new kind of warfighter. He gathered his weapon, strapped Keth to a makeshift stretcher, and started walking. He didn't know where the path led, but he knew one thing. They wouldn't be giving up. Neither would he. The ridge was quiet now, save for the gentle breeze slipping through branches above. Jorah crouched low behind the thick base of a tree, his weapon tight in his grip. The fog had thinned slightly, and in the pale light, he could just make out the twitching fingers of the dead. 13 hours since drop. 9 of his unit were gone, and he still hadn't seen a single enemy face. Across the shallow ditch ahead, Sergeant Keth shifted beneath a thermal camo cloak, eyes locked on the trees. "They're not just snipers," he whispered, voice raw from silence. "They're ghosts. I think they want us to know that." Jorah didn't respond immediately. He was parsing through every tactical protocol he knew, every Dominion battle strategy drilled into him over decades of conquest. None applied. Human warfare didn't follow patterns. It bled unpredictability. "They want us scattered," he finally said, terrified. "If we keep our formation and fall back to the high ground near the drop zone, we—" A sharp click. Jorah froze. Keth's eyes widened as his body went rigid. He glanced down. Something metal small just below his boot. The faint shimmer of tripwire. "I didn't see it," he said, trembling. "Commander, I didn't." Joris dove forward. There was a flash of movement, not light, just sudden shift, followed by a burst of concussive force that tossed them both back. Dirt erupted in a silent geyser. When the ringing cleared, Joris was flat on his side, ears numb, visor cracked. Keth was beside him, groaning, legs shredded from the knee down. He tried to push up. Joris grabbed his vest, dragging him back behind a log. The moment they cleared the open, another shot barked through the trees. A Dominion soldier, Jelna, one of the last, was lifted off her feet in the distance and dropped like a rag doll. The mist swallowed her body. Keth gritted his teeth. They planted traps hours ago. Maybe days. They knew we'd come this way. Jorah stared into the trees, finally starting to understand. This wasn't retaliation. It wasn't desperate defense. It was precision. "Who are we fighting?" Keth asked. He didn't expect an answer. Jorah gave him one anyway. Special Forces. Tier 1. Could be Delta. Could be SAD. Black budget operators. He hesitated. Or worse, Green Berets. Keth's expression shifted from pain to disbelief. "I thought they were extinct, killed in the orbital strikes." Jorah didn't look away from the forest. Apparently not all of them. The Green Berets weren't infantry. They weren't even standard commandos. They were something older, something shaped not just by skill but by culture, a brutal tribal legacy of asymmetric warfare. Deep insertion operators, trained to blend with terrain, disrupt infrastructure, dismantle armies from the inside out. The Dominion had classified them as Class Delta threats, a tag reserved for planetary-scale hazards. If they were here, this wasn't a retreat. This was a hunt. Jorah pulled a field stem from his belt and jabbed it into Keth's thigh. The younger soldier bit down hard, veins twitching as a pain-dulling agent kicked in. "We're moving. You can lean on me. We make for the ravine wall and climb. If they have the high ground, we die." Keth nodded, pale but focused. The injection steadied him. As they began the slow crawl toward the edge of the basin, Jorah's mind kept drifting back. 9 hours ago, his command had felt invincible. Then the shots came. Then the traps. Now, every movement felt like a coin toss. They passed the remains of another soldier, half buried beneath a tree root. Throat slit so cleanly the blood had pooled in a perfect circle. No bullet. Close combat. The kind that required silence and a complete lack of fear. "Why don't they finish us off?" Keth murmured. "Because we haven't learned the lesson yet," Jorah said. The climb was slow. Every branch was suspect, every loose stone a possible signal for another trap. But eventually, bleeding and winded, they reached a narrow shelf just below the ridgeline. Jorah pulled Keth up beside him and scanned the clearing ahead. It was empty, too empty. He pulled out his last deployable recon drone and tossed it forward. The tiny sphere flared to life, scanning the surroundings in a tight arc. The terrain shimmered in his HUD. For 3 seconds, all was clear. Then the feed flickered. For one frame, Jorah saw movement. A humanoid figure, camouflaged so perfectly it had blended with the trunk it leaned against. Then nothing. Static. Jorah exhaled slowly. They saw the drone. Didn't shoot it. Just let us know they're watching. "What do we do?" Keth asked. Jorah stared at the place where the figure had been. "We finished the climb." 15 minutes later, they crested the ridge. Night had nearly fallen. The sky above the canopy was a bruised purple, the last rays of sunlight casting elongated shadows across the ridge. And waiting for them, sitting beside a smoldering campfire that hadn't been there before, was a man. Not an alien, not armored, just a man. Green fatigues, rifle across his knees, dirt on his face. He didn't look up. Jorah's froze, leveling his weapon. The man raised a hand slowly. Not surrender, just acknowledgement. Keth hissed, "Is that him?" The man looked up. His eyes were pale green, calm, detached. "You're Jorah's," he said. His voice was low, like gravel poured through steel mesh. Jorah's didn't lower his weapon. "You're the one killing my soldiers." The man tilted his head, like it was a question he hadn't thought to ask himself. "I'm one of them," he said. "The others are close. Closer than you think." Keth tried to stand, but his injured leg buckled. "You're hunting us," Jorah said. "Not defending, not protecting. Hunting." The man nodded once. "That's war." "This isn't war," Keth snapped. "It's execution." The man shrugged. "You invaded. You killed children. You burned forests. We're just giving the planet back its silence." Jorah slowly lowered his weapon. "You've already won," he said. "You've destroyed the squad, taken the ridge. What's the point in this? You want surrender?" The man's smile was faint. "You don't get it yet. That's okay. Most don't." He stood, slinging his rifle over his back. For a moment, he turned and looked into the trees behind him, as if waiting for a signal. Then he looked back. "You'll get one chance," he said. "We always give one." "Chance for what?" "To live, to run, to tell your command what happened here. But you have to earn it." Keth coughed, blood flecking his lips. "What the hell does that mean?" The man didn't answer. He stepped backward, fading into the trees like he'd never been there. Jorah stared into the shadows where the man had gone. His HUD was blank. No trace. No infrared. Nothing. Then, slowly, more movement. A shadow in the trees above. Another figure. Then another. At least 3. No sound. No signatures. Keth whispered, "They're everywhere." Jorah nodded. "And they've been here longer than we thought." The campfire died behind them, as if snuffed out by unseen hands. Jorah helped Keth to his feet. "We're leaving. Now. We run, we hide, we crawl if we have to, but we survive." He didn't know if they'd make it, but he knew what they had to do, because somewhere out there in the forest that had become their prison, men who did not exist in Dominion files were moving again, unseen, unheard, and the hunt was far from over. Rain began to fall as they stumbled into the ravine's lower basin. Thin at first, then a drumming cascade that soaked everything in minutes. The downpour masked their footsteps, but Jorah knew better than to trust it. The enemy didn't rely on sound alone. He could feel the pressure in his gut, an instinct honed by years of leading Dominion battalions through planetary sieges. But this was different. The rules no longer applied. Every law of war they had mastered across a dozen systems had crumbled in these cursed woods. Keth moved beside him, leaning heavily on a salvage branch fashioned into a crude crutch. The stem had worn off. Sweat slicked his face, and every step sent shudders up his frame. But he didn't complain. They'd been moving for 6 hours without pause. No contact, no gunfire, just a creeping knowledge that every ridge, every rise, every brush of foliage could be death. "I think we passed that rock already," Keth muttered. Jorah didn't look back. "We didn't." "You sure?" "Yes." He wasn't, not entirely, but he knew doubt was death. Keth needed confidence, and Jorah needed clarity. His suit systems had begun to short from environmental exposure, the HUD stuttering with static. The beacon they planned to use to signal the evac cruiser had gone silent hours ago, jammed or worse, destroyed. Somewhere out there, the rest of the landing force had either been wiped out or turned back. No reinforcements. No orbital cover. The mission was dead. Now it was just survival. They reached a clearing shortly before dusk, small, ringed with mossy stones and broken trunks, its silence oppressive. Jorahs motioned for Keth to sit, and started unpacking the last of their rations. Keth sat down hard, breathing ragged. "You think the others made it out?" Jorahs didn't answer. "They shouldn't have sent us here," Keth went on. "They didn't understand this place. They thought Earth was just another primitive holdout. But it's alive, and it's angry." Jorahs glanced up sharply. "Earth didn't do this. People did. One team. Maybe 5 soldiers. That's all. 5. Keth barked a bitter laugh. "We lost over 100. They took out artillery, air support, armored squads. Like we were nothing." Jorahs stared at him. "That's the point." Keth blinked. Jorahs continued. "This wasn't random. This wasn't rage. It was surgical. Tactical. These weren't feral survivors or revenge-driven partisans. This is trained warfare. They studied us before we landed, charted our response times, measured our patrol patterns. Every ambush, every mine, every knife, they were steps in a strategy. You mean they're still following doctrine? I think they've evolved past it. For a long moment, the only sounds of rainfall hitting leaves. Then Keth whispered, "So what now?" Jorahs checked his depleted ammo clip and slid it back into place. "We adapt." That night, they didn't make camp. They kept moving, slower now, conserving energy but never stopping long enough to be encircled. Jorahs knew the enemy was watching, not from a distance, but up close, maybe even a few paces behind, testing their limits, seeing how long they could last. At dawn, they found bodies. 3 Dominion soldiers, half submerged in a muddy stream. One had been dismembered and laid out with geometric precision, arms and legs positioned like the hands of a clock. Keth gagged. "Message." Jorahs nodded. "Time's running out." They pressed deeper into the valley. The terrain changed. Less dense vegetation, more broken architecture. Collapsed farmhouses swallowed by vines. Roads cracked and overrun with roots. Civilization's bones. They entered what might have once been a town. A few low buildings with stone foundations, walls eaten away by weather and time. Jorah spotted an old sign in Earth script, Nash Hollow, Pop 402. It meant nothing to him. But the human operators had chosen this place. That meant it wasn't random. They took shelter in the ruins of a church. The stained glass had long since shattered, and vines coiled around the altar. Keth collapsed onto a bench with a groan. Jorahs moved cautiously to the raised pulpit, scanning the walls. There, burn marks. Soot-black scoring on stone. A recent fire. He knelt beside it, brushing ash aside. "Campfire," he said. 2, maybe 3 days ago. Keth shifted. "They were here." "No." Jorah straightened, eyes narrowing. "They are here." He turned in time to see a red bloom on the wall beside Keth's head. "Down!" Jorah shouted. They dove. A shot cracked, splintering the bench where Keth had been. Jorah rolled behind a stone pillar, yanking Keth after him. He peeked out. Nothing. No glint of scope, no muzzle flash. But he felt the presence. A predator waiting for the right moment. Another shot came, this one hit the floor an inch from Jorah's boot. "Suppressive fire," he whispered. "They want us pinned." Keth grimaced. "What's the play?" Jorah scanned the church, looking for exits. The stained glass window above the altar had enough clearance. If they could reach it. "Cover me," Jorah said. "Count of 5, then follow." Keth nodded. Jorah bolted, rolling between broken pews, making for the pulpit. A shot missed him by a hair. Another grazed his shoulder plate. He reached the window's base, launched himself to the empty frame, and landed hard in the brush beyond. Keth came next, slower but determined. Jorah reached back, grabbed his arm, and yanked him free of the window. They tumbled down a slope, hidden once more by the forest. No one followed. Not yet. Jorahs let them rest briefly, then pulled Keth upright. They could have killed us. They're hurting us, Keth realized, pushing us somewhere. Jorahs nodded grimly, to a place of their choosing. Final engagement. The trap had already been sprung. Now they were being dragged into its jaws. By midday, the trees gave way to an open field, a wide clearing with scorched earth and rusting metal spires. Dominion armor wreckage lay scattered, charred and twisted, the remains of an old skirmish. In the center, something shimmered, a beacon. Jorahs froze. It was a Dominion signal buoy, upright, intact, broadcasting faint waves of code. A distress call looped every 10 seconds. They left this here, Jorahs murmured. To lure us in, Keth said. Yes. But Jorahs stepped forward anyway. The transmission might be real, might link them back to the fleet. It was a risk, but every path forward was a risk. He reached the beacon, fingers hovering over the control panel. Then he stopped. Something was wrong. The signal, too clean, too deliberate. He leaned in and opened the casing. Not a power cell. Explosives. Keth! He started to shout, but it was too late. The blast wasn't large. Just enough to throw them apart and disorient. Jorahs hit the ground, ears ringing. When his vision cleared, he saw Keth sprawled, unmoving. And then the man appeared again. Same soldier. Green fatigues. Mud on his boots. No helmet. Just calm eyes and a knife in his hand. You're stubborn, he said. Jorahs rose, slowly, weapon lost in the blast. His hands curled into fists. Why not kill us already? The man approached. Because death's not the lesson. Understanding is. He circled Jorahs, eyes sharp. Your empire believes dominance comes from fear, from force. But force can be redirected. Fear can be adapted to. You don't understand cost. You've never bled for your home. Jorahs glanced at Keth. He was groaning, alive but barely. What's this supposed to teach us? Jorahs asked. The man stopped inches away. That earth will not be taken. Not by armies. Not by gods. You come here, you die here. One way or another. Then he turned and walked away. Jorahs knelt beside Keth, hoisted him up again. The signal buoy was silent now. Rain began falling again. And in the distance, faint and untraceable, a human voice sang something low and old, like a lullaby. The hunters had allowed them to live, but not to escape. Not yet. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the woods glazed in silver light. Water dripped from the leaves like whispered secrets. Jorahs crouched beneath a thick-branched pine, eyes locked on the slope ahead. Keth lay beside him, breathing shallowly, his skin pale beneath dried blood and bruises. The blast had broken his ribs. Moving him now was more harm than help, but leaving him behind was unthinkable. They were both marked men now. Jorahs no longer hoped for rescue. There was no evac ship, no fleet above. The Dominion had written them off, buried the failure under bureaucratic silence. Their only choices were surrender, escape, or death. But surrender here meant nothing. Just one more carcass of the forest floor. He heard it again. A click, too deliberate to be nature, too familiar to be coincidence. He leaned closer to Keth. They're flushing us out. Keth coughed, blood flecking his lips. Let them. Maybe we'll get a clean shot. Jorahs didn't answer. He shifted his weight, scanning the tree line. The enemy could be anywhere. These humans had learned to hunt as ghosts. Patient, calculating, not wasting energy on overkill. When they killed, it was intimate, close, personal. Another sound, this time behind them. A whisper of movement. Joris turned slowly, his fingers closing around a shard of metal he'd sharpened from a broken drone casing. Primitive, but still lethal. He waited, breath frozen. A figure stepped from the trees. Not the man from before. This one was smaller. A woman, tall, wiry, with a matte black rifle slung low and a face like weathered stone. Her eyes met his without fear. Joris didn't move. She raised a hand, not in greeting, not in surrender, but in command. Behind her, two others emerged, camouflaged in mottled green, their movements so quiet they seemed to glide, flanking without formation, positioning themselves with precision only muscle memory could teach. Operators. Special forces. The Dominion had guessed a few surviving Earth militias might remain. They hadn't guessed Earth's best had stayed hidden this long. The woman gestured to Keth. Her voice was low. He's dying. Joris nodded once. She said, leave him. No. A pause. He slows you. We won't give chase if you run. Joris stared. That's not who we are. Her brow lifted. Then that's why you'll both die. Joris tightened his grip on the blade. You had chances to kill us. And we still do. Then why not finish it? The woman didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and knelt beside Keth. Her hand brushed his forehead, clinical, measuring his pulse. Keth tried to speak, but couldn't. She opened a pouch and drew a small injector. Joris bristled. What is that? Painkiller. Won't save him. But he'll sleep. Joris hesitated, then nodded. She pressed the injector to Keth's neck. His breathing eased within seconds. His eyes fluttered shut. She rose and faced Joris again. You were commander once. Joris tilted his head. How do you know? Your posture, your restraint. You think in patterns. He exhaled slowly. You're not here to kill us. No, we're here to make sure you tell the others. What others? The next Dominion scouts. The analysts who will dissect this failure. The generals who think humans are easy prey. They need a story. You're going to carry it. Joris narrowed his eyes. You're letting us go? She studied him. Not yet. Movement to the left. The man from the church appeared again, calm, quiet, knife still strapped his thigh. He nodded to the woman. Their communication was fluid, unspoken. Trust built through war. He looked at Joris. You've seen pieces. Time to see the whole. Joris didn't resist when they took his weapon. They bound his hands. Not tightly, not cruelly. Enough for caution, not humiliation. They moved fast. Silent. Ghosts through the underbrush. One man stayed behind with Keth, blending into forest before Joris could see how. After an hour's march, the terrain changed again. They entered a canyon masked by cliffs and thorns. Beyond it, a hollowed-out installation, once an Earth research site, now something far more. Layers of makeshift camouflage hid its scale. Drones tracked their entry. Power nodes pulsed faintly from buried grids. Inside it was quiet, cool dry air, humming electronics. Tactical maps layered across hollow displays. Footsteps softened by worn rugs scavenged from elsewhere. A war room. Real-time feeds flickered on one screen, Dominion chatter. Partial encryption. Troop movements. Even Joris couldn't decrypt half of it. The woman motioned him forward. Watch. One feed showed Dominion command. Officers debating withdrawal. Others demanding escalation. No agreement. No comprehension. Another showed an ambush from 2 days ago. A Dominion drop pod entering orbit. Shot down by a kinetic slingshot. No trace left behind. Then came the images. Faces of Dominion soldiers. Captured, terrified, restrained but unharmed. Interviews recorded. Each spoke of being stalked, overwhelmed, dismantled piece by piece. We let them go too, the woman said. Joris stared at her. Why? Because empires don't fear defeat. They fear failure. They don't understand. He absorbed the weight of it. This wasn't resistance. This was long-term warfare. Psychological, surgical, generational. Humans didn't fight for victory anymore. They fought for deterrence. The man stepped closer. You said 5 of us. You were right. Joris looked from one to the other. You train for conquest. We train to vanish. Your empire teaches dominance. We teach doubt. That's why you'll lose. The woman added, You came to conquer, but Earth teaches consequences. For the first time, Joris saw it fully. They didn't just defend Earth. They weaponized it, turning terrain into traps, fear into fuel, silence into strategy. They'd waited years, not out of weakness, but patience. They didn't need to win every battle. They only needed the invaders to remember the pain of coming. The woman handed him a comms device, basic, encrypted, barely more than a relay. This gets you past our interference grid. One use only. Call your fleet. Tell them you're alive. Tell them what you saw. And tell them to never come back. Joris didn't speak for a long time. Then, and if I lie? If I tell them you're weak? The man's gaze didn't waver. You won't, because you know now what we are, and that we're just a fraction of what's left. He took the device. Heaviness pressed against his chest. Not shame, not guilt, but understanding. They walked him to the edge of the canyon. No fanfare, no parting words, just a woman's voice, low and final. Go, live long enough to be believed. Joris made the call that night. A coded burst to an orbiting relay, encrypted with Dominion credentials. The message would reach the edge of the sector in hours. He didn't know if it would be heeded, didn't care. Behind him, the woods whispered again, not with menace, but with warning. He turned once, toward the trees, toward the watchers he knew were there. Then he limped toward the east, cradling the weight of truth like a blade between his hands.